Here we find the local bottlecap farmer hard at work. Welcome to my channel, Inchbyinchart. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this bottlecap giant spider mini. So I take a bottle cap off of whatever my preferred beverage of the week was, and I press out the little indent that's happened from using a bottle opener. And now I'm just taking some wire just for an armature for the legs. I'm estimating about how long I'll want them to be, bending it in half, and hot gluing it into the center of the bottle cap. Spiders have 8 legs, obviously, so I'm going to do this with 4 pieces of wire that are going across the bottom. This is partially to make them more stable and less likely to fall out. If you have a single piece of wire secured in the center, you won't be able to have one leg break off as easily, at least in theory. So I'm just using some wire cutters. I have some thin jewelry quality wire cutters, so they're very thin needle nose, and I'm just bending the legs out how I want, using some spider references to generally guide how the legs should look. And I want my front 2 legs to be up a little bit, sort of like they're grabbing or attacking, because I don't know if you've ever seen some spiders do this, but it's pretty creepy, and they lunge forward and grab stuff. So I'm just going to use some tin foil as an armature for the abdomen, just making a ball about the right size, pressing it as smooth as I can, as tightly as I can so that it stays together, and adjusting my legs a little bit more because I need them to fit on my particle board base, which I just have cut out at this point. Testing my fit. And now I'm just gonna hot glue the little abdomen on. Here's my armature. Now for some Sculpey. I debated for a while about what to use to make this, and at the last second, I randomly decided that I was going to use Super Sculpey. I really should not have done this because I used hot glue. So you have to bake Super Sculpey, and I don't know. I had some ideas. I thought that if I baked it at a lower temperature, that it probably wouldn't melt. And honestly, I like working with Super Sculpey. It was a last second decision. It was a not smart decision. It worked out okay in the end. I managed to pull this off, but if I were to recommend this to someone else, I would say use something that doesn't need to be baked if you're going to use hot glue. Hot glue is great for securing stuff, but it just doesn't make sense when you're baking a thing, of course. So I use the Super Sculpey to cover my leg armatures, just not thinking about the issues that will happen later when I go to bake this thing. And I start at the bases and just do little balls of where the legs connect, and then I cover the outermost parts of the legs, I guess the hands, feet, feelers, I don't know, the ends, and then I cover the middle parts once I've done all the outer parts and the bases, because I want to give it a segmented look and give it kind of a shielded insect look. I did the same thing on my scorpion minis that I've made, which at this point I've made quite a few, and I liked how it made it look very easily segmented without much effort. So I do these long worms, have them a little bit pointed at the end, and then I press them onto the middle segment of each leg. And I'm using my silicone sculpting tool and my fingers to make sure that it's secured and pressed all around the wire. It's totally looking like a little tarantula now. So here I'm using my liquid Sculpey Bacon Bond, and I'm just going to use it to help secure the face onto the bottle cap. I don't know that the Sculpey would stick on its own. I think I've done this before, where I've put Sculpey directly on a bottle cap without the liquid Sculpey, and it was okay, but I couldn't remember for sure, and I have it, and might as well use it if you've got it, and it makes sense, right? Right. So I've just made a little triangle, basically, and I'm smushing the back down and kind of blending it down into the bottle cap and making sure that the front is a little bit blunted and obviously raised because this is where my eyes will go. And I'm just making its mandibles, mouth parts, creepy fang things. Same deal, just Sculpey Bacon Bond and then lightly pressing the mouthy bits on. And I decided that the head was a little bit too low, so I beefed it up a bit with a little bit more Sculpey. And I'm just using the pointed end of my cone-shaped silicone sculpting tool to dot in where the eyes will go, and making little balls of clay to add actual eyes where I put the dots once I was happy with where I had positioned them. Then I take another piece of Super Sculpey and flatten it with my fingers. I didn't bother with the pasta machine because this requires so much pressing and molding around the tinfoil ball, and I know it's not going to be perfectly smooth anyway, so why bother? So I just make a little pancake with my fingers, and then I press it all around the abdomen and use the side of my sculpting tool to really press it in hard. And I'm just adding a little piece to make sure that it looks like it's connected properly with the bottle cap. Make sure my whole abdomen's covered. You won't see underneath the bottle cap, so it doesn't need to be covered. It's probably a good thing that I didn't bother. Although, well, I don't know what would have happened. Now I'm curious to experiment. If I put Super Sculpey around a blob of hot glue and baked it, if it would be like a pocket and keep it inside or something. Anyway, I decided that the weird mandibles were not big enough because I was looking at reference pictures of tunnel web spiders, which live in the country that I'm in, and they have pretty large mouthy bits, so I decided to beef them up and make them way bigger. Here I've now baked it, and you can see the errors of my ways. The abdomen fell off, the hot glue splooshed down onto the tinfoil that I had underneath my piece, and it just slumped a little bit. However, the legs stayed exactly where they should have been, and I think this is just because the wire was wedged in tightly and the Sculpey was pressed on firmly, so it actually wasn't a huge deal. It was just that the abdomen fell off. So since I thought hot glue was a good approach for securing things, I decided to just squirt hot glue back in there and hot glue the abdomen back on. And it fit perfectly because everything was shaped just as it should have been. It just fell off when it was baking. And it still baked perfectly fine, so whatever. Accident, but not a, well, mistake, but not a huge deal. So here I'm just jazzing up my base. I have the particle board cut to size. It's a large creature, so it's 2 inch by 2 inch. And I'm doing my sort of paper mache thing that I've done on a bunch of other bases with PVA glue and water on a brush and some toilet paper. Once it's dried, I am just going to paint everything black because it's spooky season and it's a giant spider and it's spooky, so it's black. Used a bit too much paint, so I slopped some of it over onto my spider. And here I'm just putting the base coat on my spider. It's all black, obviously. And after a good coat of black all over, I just do a little black wash on top to make sure that I got into all the little crevices, and I'm going back to my base, which is now dried. So I am trying to figure out what I want to do with the spider, and I decided that I am getting more into having fancier bases. I do them on occasion, sometimes I'm just lazy, but I figured with this one I could do something kind of neat underneath it, but I needed to raise it, and I wanted it to kind of look like it was crawling down some rock ledges, sort of like Shelob does in the Lord of the Rings movie, where she does the jabby thing in Frodo's back and makes him froth at the mouth and is like walking along those cave walls? Crevice walls? I don't know. You get what I'm saying. So I'm making these little rock ledge things on either side that my giant spider is supposed to be standing on top of and essentially crawling down towards the characters. I'm just doing a base coat of all black on it. And now, because I decided it would be good if it was like a slate rock look, and I can paint that easily, I am just doing multiple coats of gray and then white. So first coat is a darker gray, second coat's a little bit lighter gray, and it's not real wet paint, but it's also not completely a dry brush for the first two coats. But the white layer, which is what I'm doing now, is completely just dry brush white, and it just gives that last little boost of the texture. And now for some body parts. So I like to chop up minis and turn them into other things, and I had the skeleton arm with shield left over. So I've removed the arm and the little peg that connected it to the shield, and I'm painting it white because it's a skeleton bone arm, and it's going to be one of the things in my little area of doom below the spider. Here I am painting some bones into the pit below the spider. This is going to be a skull, and then I just put some random bones, arms, legs, that kind of stuff painted in there. I didn't have a whole lot of body parts, and some of the minis that I have are unmaimed at this point, and I decided that I would just try painting them because I don't actually know how visible this will be. It's sort of an experiment, so I figured I would just try this out and see how it went. And what spider hell pit is complete without blood? Now, I didn't show it, but I used E6000 glue to glue in the little skeleton arm, and I decided that the white bones were too clean looking, so I go in with a bit of a reddish brown and just add some decay and bits of meatiness to the bones and skeleton. Jumping back over to my spider, I am doing red eyes. Most of the spiders that I used for reference had red thoraxes, but I didn't want it to have a red thorax when I used a black bottle cap. I don't know how much it matters because I put black paint all over it, but I figure if it ever does get scratched, it's less likely to show a different color underneath if I do black paint on a black bottle cap. But I did like that a lot of these kinds of spiders that have this body shape are furry, so I add a little bit of dry brushed brown on the top just to give it like a hair look, but it's super light, so it's probably not noticeable to anyone but me. And then I add some red to all of the joints and the fangy bits because I thought it looked cool. And here I am preparing to make the web. I just took a piece of white yarn and I'm pulling it apart to get all the fibers out. There's lots of different ways you could do this. You could use cotton balls, you could use polyfill, you could use wool. I just happen to have some yarn, so I used that. And here I'm actually showing my E6000, and I'm just glopping the E6000 on the inside upper area of the walls of the rock cliff edge things that I made that the spider's going to be perched on. And I used my X-Acto knife to press the yarn fibers into the glue because I thought it would be easier to pull away, but it wasn't pressing in as much as I hoped, and the yarn was sticking to it, so I ended up using my fingers quite a bit as well. And some scissors to trim the excess so that it's not overhanging my base. It looks all spooky and webby and spidery now. And now to add the spider. I went with E6000 glue since I'd been using it anyway. Here's my little pipette and my UV resin that I'm using to jazz up the eyeballs on my spider. I don't do this on every single mini, but I do use it quite a bit because I think it looks pretty cool. Going back, wish I had used it on a pin or needle instead of my pipette, just because a few of the eyes, it started to sploosh over a little bit, and curing it with my UV light. And here it is done.